Good afternoon. We're here in Washington, D.C. with the Honorable Paul Hellyer. Welcome, Paul, to our...
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Washington, D.C. Just before we begin, do you want to just outline a bit of your background, both politically and any other things you wish to...
Well, I've been in and out of politics most of my life. First elected in 1949. Served in 3 governments. First Louis Saint Laurent, which most people probably don't even remember, and then right through the government of Lester B. Pearson, and then later for a year with Pierre Trudeau. And I held senior portfolios. National defense was my most important one, and then after that transport for a while, but these were very senior portfolios at the time, and gave me a chance to learn a lot of things about Canada and about the world, and very good post-graduate course at the public expense.
Good. We're here to discuss a very specific issue, the UFO ET presence, and that's one of the reasons why we're here at the citizens' hearings, and you're part of that as a witness. Can we just go back a little bit and kind of refresh, at least my memory, and even perhaps yours, about how you first became involved in this? You first heard about it in a certain way, and then you moved forward with it. What got things going?
Yeah, actually when I was Minister of Defense I got sighting reports, but I was too busy, as you may or may not recall, unifying the Army, Navy and Air Force into a single defense force, and it wasn't high on my radar. So I noted them, and they were very similar to the ones that Nick Pope mentioned for the United Kingdom. About 80% of the sightings were natural phenomena, and the other 20 were unexplained. They were legitimately unidentified flying objects. Well, I didn't really do much in this area for a long while. I did something that got in on the internet. Was 1967, during our centennial year. I was invited to St. Paul's, Alberta, to take part in their celebrations for the centennial. They had more different projects than any other town in Canada. And one of them was to dedicate the world's first flying saucer landing pad. And it was amazing how prescient they were. The things that they said, and looking at the, not the world view, but the broader view and so on. And of course at the time I was just doing my duty and enjoying a day in northern Alberta in a quaint little bilingual town, and it was great. But my interest in the subject of UFOs really began only about 10 years ago, when a chap from Ottawa by the name of Pierre Junot started sending me material on it. And I tried to tell the truth, so I said, look, I haven't got time to look at it. And he said, well, that's all right, maybe someday you will. So he kept sending it and sending it, and he sent me a book called The Day After Roswell by Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, which was all about at that time we thought crash, but now we know it was crashes at Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. And I thought to myself, say, that kind of looks interesting. And I don't read much because I don't have time, but I thought I'll take it to the lodge. You may or may not know that my late wife and I had a little tourist business in Muskoka that we ran for 45 years, and so I thought I'll take it up there in the summer and sit in one of those Muskoka chairs, look over the lake, and read this interesting book. So in the meantime, Pierre had sent me a few things. He said, watch Peter Jennings' 2-hour special on UFOs, which I did, and unlike some of the people I've heard around here, I actually was impressed, because all of these ex-policemen and air traffic controllers and airline pilots saying that they had seen UFOs. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, well, why would they lie? Why would they go on the air and say, I saw a UFO, if they didn't see it? So this had some effect on me, I must admit. But then I took the book up to Muskoka in the summer of 2005 and was reading it, sitting down on the lawn, just like I envisaged, and my nephew came along and said, what are you reading? And I told him what it was, and he said, well, I'm a skeptic. I said, well, it's a free country, you can be a skeptic if you want to. So he went home, and I finished the book. 2 days later he phoned and said, I called the general and told him what you were reading, and he said, every word of it is true and more. And this really influenced me considerably, because I had found the book compelling, and I actually believed that, notwithstanding the fact that I had intended to turn you and Mike Bird down on your invitation to speak in Toronto, that the implications of UFOs and the extraterrestrial presence and the technology and all of that were so great that they had a profound effect on the future of humankind. And they should be in the public domain. We should be talking about them. The people of the United States and the people of the world both deserve to know what was going on. So that's when I finally decided, well, maybe I should change my mind and say yes instead of no. And
At the Convocation Hall.
You may recall I was getting married a week from that, the day of your conference, so I had to get permission from my intended bride. And I told her, this, I didn't intend to be a lie, but I said, it's just a one-off thing, you know, and it won't involve any of my time later, which was not to be the case. And she reluctantly admitted that I might go if I wished to do so. But before actually phoning you, I phoned the general. And my nephew had given him a heads up that I was going to call, and I had met him, so we knew each other, just casually.
He's an American general.
Yeah, he's a United States Air Force general. And even before I could say, hello, how are you, he said, every word is true and more. And then he went on for 20 minutes to talk about the more to the extent that he could within his oath, you know. And that included the fact that there had been face-to-face meetings between United States officials and the extraterrestrials. And with this assurance, I then decided to phone you, and the rest is history. I went to Toronto and joined your group there and said that UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead.
And that made history, didn't it?
And it really did.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, but I was the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say that. And it was maybe a dubious distinction, but it was a first. And I wouldn't have said it if I didn't know that it was so, if I wasn't absolutely, totally convinced. Then, of course, after that, if I was in kindergarten then, I got briefings from all of the, not all, but maybe most of the major ufologists in North America and Canada. And one after another, they opened up, but also information came into my office from all over the world, and some of it classified, some of it not. I sifted it out. I got books in the mail, and I read, more books than I can even remember. And each time learning something, and then of course there were some conferences I attended and listened to all of the presentations and so on.
The idea of being almost a magnet for this kind of stuff, being sent to you and directed at you personally, okay, you really attracted a lot of attention in this way. When did you, in your mind, when did it crystallize that these things are real? What was the moment you said, you know what, this is it?
Well, that was almost from the beginning. But then all of the evidence that came in just confirmed and broadened my knowledge. As I said, from kindergarten to maybe grade 6 now or something like that, roughly. But all of the information and all of the people I talked to, and then later, of course, the books and talking to people, and before I published my book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, interviewing abductees, including Travis Walton and then Jim Sparks, and really grilling them for hours to make sure that they were telling the truth. And I gave them the rough time, and they both came through with flying colors. And I learned a lot from him, especially from Sparks, because he had been abducted so many times and he'd had so much information given to him. He was one of the few abductees who was conscious much of the time that he was in the airships. Right. And so he had a lot to say to me, which I found very educational and very inspiring.
The idea behind the history that you've developed yourself personally and what's going to happen after, there are generational kinds of things happening. And a lot of focus currently is on the youth of today and where they're going to take this issue. What would you say to the young people today to extend that, to take up the gauntlet and the challenge and move forward with this?
Well, I would say to the young people, you're looking for a cause. Some of you don't know what you want to do. You don't know what the future holds. You're kind of confused and trying to find yourself, as the saying goes. But there are three huge issues in the world, and they are global warming, changing the monetary system, and public disclosure of the UFO phenomena. And go get them, go after them, and find out all you can about them, and do something about them. Because if you don't put pressure on, nothing's going to happen. And the one thing President Obama did that was really relevant recently, when he was addressing the young Israelis, he said that politicians were often timid and wouldn't move unless they were pushed by the people. Couldn't have been more dead on. So I'm saying to the young people, you have got to do the pushing. And if you get together and really turn the heat up, and also you have the advantage of a means of communication that wasn't available in my generation.
That was my next question. Go ahead, yeah.
Because then you relied on the mainline press. And the mainline press on all three of these major issues has been a washout, just almost nil. And so you have this new means of getting around them and communicating with each other, and very quickly. So get the facts and get them out, and then mobilize the power of numbers and make something happen. And if you do that, it could happen and will happen.
Let me try something else on you. As a former member of the Liberal Party, we now have a new leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, Justin Trudeau. A young person, a fledgling in politics, as far as many of us are concerned. How do you see, maybe it's an overextended extrapolation, but if you were to advise him today and sitting down in front of him and to brief him and say, listen, I think behind the scenes you need to pay attention to something, how would you go about talking to the current leader of the Liberal Party about this issue?
Well, the first thing you have to do is get his attention. That's pretty tough for a new leader because they have walls around them.
Right.
They're not as pervasive, perhaps, as the intelligence people who keep you from finding out anything that they don't want you to find out. But they build walls, and I found this true of the president. For example, I've sent him stuff on monetary reform 2 or 3 times, and I'm sure it never gets through. And of course, if you have as your chief of staff some ex-bankers, they make sure that it doesn't get through, just as we've been hearing testimony for the last 3 days from people in the armed forces who say zero, blank, don't talk about it. So I would have to get his attention. Fortunately, I have some friends who are quite close to him, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to get an audience with him in the not too distant future, and to talk actually about these 3 areas that I mentioned: the global warming, monetary reform, which is the most urgent, because if we don't change the monetary system, we won't have the money to go from fossil fuels to clean energy fast enough to save the world. And then the ET phenomenon, because the black ops have the technology that we need for the fast transfer. They've got it. They've had it for years. Not only are they keeping it under wraps, but they're making it tough for anybody that tries to develop it. And they go in and they've done all sorts of things. They've smashed up equipment. I was talking to somebody, I had dinner with them last night, whose friend had developed one of these machines, went out one night and came back, and all of his equipment was gone. Disappeared. Nothing left, not even a postage stamp. He built it over again, and the same thing happened, and he has left the United States, has gone into self-styled exile to avoid this kind of situation arising again. And first of all, to recover his composure, because he was really shaken as you would be. And what I said to the young chap last night is, he's not alone. People have been having this sort of experience all over.
That's the way the oil industry works, doesn't it?
Yes, and the oil industry is, it's bigger than that. The oil industry is just part of what I call the cabal. And the cabal really includes the monetary monopoly, really, the international monetary cartel, which is at the apex of power in the cabal. And then, of course, they control the oil cartel. And then they have also means of controlling intelligence agencies and armed forces, which the chairman of our hearing here is referred to as a military junta. Not everybody, of course, but the people in the know that are pulling the strings. And it's all part of one great big operation which is moving the world in the wrong direction. And it's got to be turned around, and turned around fast, or we're going to wind up the way they want us to wind up, which is with a world government with them running it, and one which doesn't have any accountability to the people whatsoever.
Do you consider yourself a revolutionary?
Yes, in a sense. I mean, in what I consider the best sense, I'm not pick up my gun or my pitchfork and go after the guys that I don't agree with, but a revolutionary of the mind and the heart, because we're moving in a direction. We've got to stop this business of saying, you know, we have to have the biggest armed forces, and we've got to have the most deadly weapons of mass destruction so that we can wipe out the other guys and keep our first strike capability and do all of this sort of thing in an era when that's passé.
It's an old paradigm.
It's an old paradigm, and interestingly enough, in my opinion, the reason that there has been so much activity on the part of the extraterrestrials, who incidentally have been coming to this planet for millennia, I have no doubt about that. I have some information to back that up. All of a sudden, huge activity right after the first detonation in White Sands in New Mexico. And ever since then, they have been coming. They have taken inventories of the atomic, of the stores, the stocks, the missiles, all of this stuff all over the world, and not only just putting a few of them out of commission. And I was interested to hear that they still haven't quite made up their mind whether that was deliberate or it was just the effects of the electromagnetic pulses, but all of this sort of thing. And
one last question. What keeps you going?
I guess the urgency, because I'm a realist in a sense. I think we've only got a few years to switch from fossil fuels to clean energy, to have any chance of keeping the world really a habitable place for the human species. And in my book, which you're familiar with, Light at the End of the Tunnel, a survival plan for the human species, I gave us 10 years. Well, 2 years have gone by since that was published. We now have, probably 8 years, which really means we have to have a mobilization very similar to the one we had in World War II. In World War II, and I remember it because I was around, we took every automobile plant and refrigerator factory and washing machine factory and converted them to making arms. Today we have to do exactly the opposite. We have to take all the arms manufacturing plants and convert them into making these machines for zero-point clean energy. And if we do, and if we have the financing, which is more than possible, which can be done, and if we went at it with the same kind of fervor and organization that we did to win World War II, then I think we could save the situation before it's too late. But what's lacking now, first of all, openness on the energy, understanding and control of the money system, and a lot of people saying, well, you know, we've got to get enough oil to last for 40 or 50 years until the world goes up in flames, and then maybe we'll have to start worrying about it.
A message to the Canadian press, please, on your behalf.
A message to the Canadian press?
Please.
Please, please, please. A message to the Canadian press, please, please, please start putting some of your best investigative reporters on 3 important subjects: global warming, reforming the monetary system, which today is nothing but one gigantic Ponzi scheme, ripping off the people of the world, and we have to change it so that governments have the fiscal flexibility to be able to pay for the transition from an oil economy to a clean energy economy within the perhaps 8 years that we have to do it, and then to insist, go and look at the ET phenomenon and the black ops and all of the other ramifications of the cover-up by the shadow government, as it is, or the Cabal, as I have been calling it, and find out why they haven't made public the clean energy sources that they have, and why they haven't made the public aware of what they've been doing for the last 60 years, and why they haven't been making Congress aware of where the money has been going. That is really the business of Congress, and what happened to the missing trillions, and what is the connection. So these are things that would be a dream for investigative reporters. So get your people on the trail and find out what is really going on in the world and in the cosmos, and let your readers know about it.
The Honorable Paul T. Hellyer, thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been an honor.